Hi friends, my name is Jake. Welcome to Canadian Cutting Edge, and today we've got a slip joint knife, as you of course saw in the title and in the thumbnail. This is the Spyderco Byrd TERN. It's a budget line from Spyderco, the Byrd lineup, made in China, 8CR13 MOV stainless steel. It's a SlipIt series. It's a slip joint knife, and you might be interested in it. You're not going to get a better, lower priced slip joint knife from Spyderco than this. Is it worth getting? Well, that depends. And I'll tell you what it depends on when we get to the tabletop in just a few seconds. Let's begin with a size comparison. We always compare with the Ontario Rat one because it's a very common knife that a lot of people have. And of course, it doesn't even fit on the screen. This is a small knife, definitely sub 3 inches, and I'll give you the exact measurements later on. By the way, you can't trust the measurements that are on websites online. I saw, the weight of this thing, a 25% weight range between the lowest weight and the highest weight that I saw listed was a 25% difference. So, yeah. But I'll give you the exact measurements as I measured them here at my place. So it's a much smaller knife. It's, a thinner knife and lighter and smaller. It's a little guy. What is the price of this one? And that can make a difference where you live. Now, let's start off with my friends in Australia. For you, I recommend this knife if you can get it before they sell out. There's a store, campfire.com.au, that's got this on clearance for $24.69. That's Australian dollars. That's half the price that it is in the rest of the world. If you like this thing at all and you're in Australia, maybe you should stop watching and order it. Then watch the rest of the video, and you could always cancel the order if you change your mind. But yeah, everywhere else it costs a fair bit more. In fact, in Australia, I saw a listing for $102.95 for this knife. And then there was a different listing for like $69 at another store. So, the stores have it in Australia, but if you want to get it, make sure you check out campfire.com.au. How about where I bought it? I bought mine at White Mountain Knives, and of course you save 10%, and a slip joint like this has no problems getting into Canada, so that's just fine. $37.10 is what it's listed for there. That's American dollars. Take off your 10% with coupon code CCE. That makes it $33.39. That's about $43.50 Canadian for this knife. So, yeah, that might be a good deal. It all depends on if you like it or not. In Canada, Blades Canada, aka Warriors and Wonders, has it for $49.99 Canadian. In Europe, Knives and Tools has a listing for their UK store and their Euro store, $49.95. That's either pounds or euros, depending on where you live. So it's not a cheap knife, and that is the biggest con about this knife, in my opinion, is you can get the same quality knife, made in China for about half the price, which is why the AU price is okay. How well does this thing cut? Well, this one cuts quite well right now, especially if I cut through certain materials because of the way they sharpen this thing. It got a pretty good sharpening score, better than average. And it's easy to get a good grip of this knife and, do some slicing. It's fairly thin behind the grind, not super thin or anything, but fairly thin behind the grind. And, you can puncture with this knife and you can slice and cut with this knife. It does okay. It's a full flat grind. It's got that bird-shaped hole right here. It's like a round head and a beak. At least that's how I remember it. We've got an upswept on the spine with jimping on it. Sort of this leaf design. Maybe you can call it a spear point design if you just look at that. It's a half and half forward choil with jimping on it there as well. A flat spine. There's no chamfering or anything. It's just, that's how it's made. There's no sharpness choil. Well, look at this close-up picture. It almost looks like they were thinking about a sharpness choil back there, but I know they didn't. But they, ground in just a little bit when they cut it back right there. It's just very odd right there if you take a close look at it. There's no sharpness choil. The badging, we've got a registered trademark not a trademark. We've got a registered mark right there, and then it says China right there, because that's where it's made, by the Sanrenmu Corporation. And on this side, Byrd, which is the sub-brand from Spyderco, and then the steel 8CR13 MOV, which I think is a good budget steel. There's, of course, better budget steels out there, and there's worse budget steels, most definitely. 8CR13 is an okay budget steel, in my opinion. Now, like I said, it's a slip joint, so we've got this back spring that's incorporated into the whole knife. Now, if you're not familiar with slip joints, I just posted a video explaining how slip joint knives function, how they work on the inside, although I will take this apart to see what kind of washers they have in here, although I have a strong suspicion I know what they are already. But, you know, this is a traditional back spring knife. The handle, you know, it's got a big crown back here, and then in the handle you got a forward grip, a middle finger grip, and then a bit of a swell, and then another sort of a recurve section there for another finger in there. My hands are just into the extra large range, and I get a solid, comfortable 4-finger grip. Really, really nice. The big advantage of the way they design this is you're safe when you use this knife, as long as you've got the grip up here in that half and half choil up there. If you think slip joint knives are scary, but you live in a jurisdiction where you really should be carrying slip joint knives according to the law or something, this is the kind of slip joint knife you want to use to get used to slip joint knives, because if you're gripping it right there, no matter what hits the spine or what happens, as long as your fingers, your index finger stays there, it cannot close on you. It can't hurt the whole hand that you're holding it in. Of course, you can cut your other arm if you want to, or whatever, or your leg or whatever. But, you know, it's a very safe way to grip the knife. And with that jimping in there, it's just extremely secure. The handle's quite comfortable. It's chamfered all the way around, the edge everywhere. And then we've got this wire clip. As you see, there's no lanyard hole. You could tie a lanyard off the end of the clip here. Some people do that. I don't use lanyards anyway, so it's not a big deal. It's, you know, a decent wire clip. Spyderco is known for good wire clips, and this is a pretty good wire clip. Of course, right and left. And I got it dirty really a little bit right there. I do carry my knives for testing. I do thorough testing, and so, yeah, it's just got a little bit dirty from my testing. It was clean when it came brand new. How well does that pocket clip function? Let's take a look. Climbs over, we've got that flat top right there. Climbs over, goes to the full depth. There's not a lot of extra room. You can still get a thicker pocket in there, like with heavier pants, but hey, that's pretty good. I like that. Not bad at all. The rest of the handle here, these screw heads, they look like they're T8, don't they? Well, let's grab a T8 screwdriver. And yes, these are T8 screw heads, which I'm much happier about than I would have been if they were T6. They're still button screws, which I don't really like, but they're not fully inset button screws, so they don't have that ugly look of being inset and then having, you know, like a ditch all the way around where, you know, lint and stuff can get caught behind the screw and the G10. So not bad. I'm sure you're wondering how it's made. Let's open it up and take a quick look. One of the first things to notice is that these screws, each one is a different length. So it's easy to get it confused. So when you take it apart, lay them out, you know, in line with where they go again so that you won't get it wrong. And of course, that's what the wire clip looks like taken apart. It's pretty decent. And there's your slip joint. We've got a thin little phosphor bronze washer. And I did a whole video explaining how this works. This one doesn't have a stop pin, but it's got a stop point. So this foot here, you probably should not grind it away. If you grind that away, when you go to close the knife, your cutting edge is going to slam into the back of that spring. So don't do that. If you take this thing completely apart, you know, and you've never done it before, then, you know, hopefully you can get it back together, because this spring here is constantly pushing and it's going to make it tricky for you to be able to put it back together again. But I'm going to do that now instead of taking it all the way apart. And we're going to go over all the specs, measurements, and such. Okay, I've got it back together. It was a little bit tricky. This screw, it is actually too short. It's just barely holding on. Barely got one round of thread holding on. So I think it wasn't supposed to be 3 different length screws. I think that screw's supposed to be longer. I ended up putting the shortest one in here. And yeah, needs a longer screw over there. The measurements, I weighed this at 54 grams. That's 1.9 ounces. Not bad. The length of the cutting edge, 54.9 millimeters, 2.34 inches. Length of the blade, tip to the closest spot on the G10, 70.7 millimeters, 2.78 inches. The thickness of the steel, so this big flat section over here, the ricasso, 2.43 millimeters. That's 95.5 thousandths of an inch thick. The blade depth in the cutting area, the widest points right there at the heel of the blade, 26.5 millimeters, 1.04 inches. How thick is it behind the grind? Measured in 3 spots. The average is 0.46 millimeters, 18 thousandths of an inch. The grind angles, they're a bit wonky. This side's got an average of 13.3 degrees. This side's got an average of 12.1 degrees. It should have been sharper from the factory. By the way, the factory sharpness was 110 bests, which is better than average. Like this has got a very shallow grind angle. 13.3 degrees. It started at 10.9, ended at 15.7 degrees. That's how we got the 13.3. So 4.8 degrees of change, the angle length. That's a big change on, just a little over 2 inches here. 2 1/3 inches. This side started at 12.2, ended at 12 degrees even. So that's 0.2 degrees of change, but still 12 degrees? 12 degrees is maybe something you put on a Scandi grind. When it's thin and that angle, this edge is not super durable the way it is. I'd probably sharpen this to 18 degrees per side. For the kinds of use that I would do with this kind of knife, yeah, 18 degrees per side would be just fine. Maybe a micro bevel at 20 degrees, but still, that's what I would do. The handle now. The handle length, 95.2 millimeters, 3.75 inches. The grip area back here, it's about 8 centimeters or 3 inches, but if you use the whole knife, it's about 10 centimeters or 4 inches. That's pretty good. The thickness of this handle on the G10 surface, it's about 9 millimeters. That's 0.354 of an inch. The handle depth within the grip, the widest points right about there, 24.9 millimeters, 0.98 of an inch. When the knife is closed, the widest points right up here, 36.8 millimeters, 1.45 inches. And the total length of this knife from tip to tail, 166 millimeters, 6.54 inches. So 6.5 inches, yeah, not bad. Pretty decent proportions. One thing I didn't show, which I so often forget to do, is the balance point. I got to do it with the pocket clip up. And, well, let's do it this way. There's the balance point right there. Now, I would prefer the balance point to be, right over the pivot pin. Maybe even right over this finger, but it's back here. That's not a big deal on such a light knife, so not that big a deal. What do I think of this thing? Well, I've already mentioned, I don't think it's worth the price that you have to pay for it, unless you can get it at a clearance price. The suggested retail price for this, and the price that most stores sell it for, I think it's just too high. I wish it was done better. With those screws are really bothering me that it's not coming closed. I did put some Loctite on there to keep that one thread, locked. Well, not Loctite. I used VC3 Vibratite. I really like this stuff. It's called Thread Mate instead of Thread Locker. That stuff's awesome. But I shouldn't have to do that just to get it together. That's not good. But the design, I'm a big fan of this design. It's really nice, especially if you're new to slip joints and you want to try out a slip joint. This would be a good first slip joint other than the price. It just would be. That's really good. A little bit more about this sharpness choil. I don't know if I would want a sharpness choil or not. It doesn't really need one. Like the plunge here is just basically a step down. They don't have one of those curved plunges. to go from the full thickness of the ricasso to the full bevel here. It's just a step, and so just having no sharpener's toil is fine, I think. But if there's going to be a transition that curves down, then I really do like sharpener's toils. Now I still might put a sharpener's toil in here, who knows. Just remember, don't grind this off because you need that so that you don't have your edge hit the inside of that steel. I like the pocket clip. That's really nice. And the grip, super comfortable. Poorly sharpened, bad angles. Once this thing gets too dull and I need to sharpen it, like I said, I'm going to change it to about 18 degrees per side. So there you go. Thank you to my supporters. You guys are awesome. I appreciate the help. And the next video you're going to see might be a little while because I got to do a knife sale in between. Thanks for watching. Thanks for liking, sharing, commenting, and subscribing. And remember, friends, cut towards your chum, not your thumb.